I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
William had entered the jeweler's expecting a private confirmation about one of Diana's most personal treasures. He did not expect to hear Princess Beatrice's name. The words landed without ceremony. The emerald tiara connected to his mother had been left to Beatrice. For several seconds, the prince said nothing. Then his expression hardened. His chair moved sharply against the floor, and William walked out, turning what should have been a discreet inheritance discussion into a royal rupture nobody in the room could ignore. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had expected questions of provenance, not a verdict that would cut through memory. Across the table, Princess Beatrice remained motionless as the senior jeweler opened records tracing the tiara's ownership. Provenance records are documents showing where an object came from, who owned it, and how ownership changed. Here, however, they carried something heavier. They showed that Diana's emerald tiara had been designated to Beatrice, not to William, Catherine, Charlotte, or the direct Prince of Wales line. The future king stared at the page as though one sentence had shifted the ground beneath him. Beatrice did not smile or reach toward the case. Instead, she looked at William and quietly admitted she had never expected the piece to become hers. Her shock deepened his discomfort, because he could see she had not engineered this moment. Yet the prince could not separate legal certainty from the emotional wound. Diana's jewelry had never been mere decoration to him. Each surviving piece carried the presence of a mother he had lost too early, and now one seemed to be moving beyond the family circle he instinctively associated with her memory. The jeweler broke the silence by placing a sealed ownership memorandum beside the presentation case. An ownership memorandum is a written record identifying who should receive or control an item. He explained that this designation came before later royal arrangements, meaning it was not recent and had not been created for Beatrice's benefit. William leaned forward. His voice became colder. Had anyone, he asked, tried to alter that designation afterward? The jeweler hesitated. Then he confirmed that a later inquiry had indeed been made. Beatrice looked from the document to William, suddenly understanding that the real story might not be who received Diana's tiara, but who had tried to redirect it. Before the name behind that inquiry could be given, William pushed back his chair, said he needed time, and walked out. Beatrice remained with the unopened case, knowing his departure looked like anger, but sensing the deeper conflict had only just begun. For William, Diana's belongings were never merely possessions. They were fragments of a mother whose absence had shaped almost every chapter of his adult life. For Beatrice, the situation carried a different burden. She had not asked to stand at the center of Diana's legacy, yet suddenly, one glittering object had placed her there. What looked publicly like a dispute over jewels was privately becoming something far more painful, a question of who had the right to carry memory. William stopped only after putting distance between himself and the appointment. He pressed his fingers against his forehead and tried to steady the thoughts rushing through him. His anger was not truly aimed at Princess Beatrice. That realization made the moment more complicated, not less. The prince understood that royal possessions often carried meanings far beyond price. A jewel could represent a marriage, a promise, a family wound, or a memory protected for decades. To him, anything closely tied to Diana carried an emotional responsibility that could never be measured by ownership papers alone. Beatrice remained inside, but she made no move toward the tiara. When the senior jeweler gently asked whether she wanted the case opened, she refused. She would not touch it, she said, and she certainly would not try it on while William was distressed. Her voice carried embarrassment rather than excitement. She understood royal symbolism well enough to know why the inheritance mattered, yet she had spent most of her life outside the direct succession battles that surrounded William. She was part of the Windsor family, but rarely positioned at the center of decisions involving the future crown. Now Diana's name had pulled her directly into one. The jeweler chose his next words carefully. He explained that the emerald piece had carried a private significance for Diana, connected not to succession, but to loyalty. The distinction mattered. Diana had not viewed every treasured object as something that automatically belonged with the highest-ranking branch of the family. Some pieces, he said, had been associated with people she believed would preserve their meaning without turning them into symbols of status. William heard that explanation later and immediately became quieter. Beatrice's designation had not been random. Diana had apparently wanted the tiara protected by someone who would treat it as memory first and rank second. That idea unsettled him because it challenged his first instinct. Yet it also awakened something stronger than anger: curiosity. What had Diana seen in Beatrice, or in the family around her, that convinced her to make such an unexpected choice? The answer was buried in an older royal wound, and the trail led back to one private gathering, where Diana made a decision nobody present realized would echo decades later. Years before William's walkout, before succession pressures and modern royal battles, there had been one quiet family evening that changed the meaning of the emerald tiara forever. Diana had arrived carrying frustration she could barely disguise. Beatrice was still young, William was watching more than anyone realized, and one conversation about loyalty left a permanent mark. What happened that evening never became a public story, but in this narrative, it became the exact moment Diana decided where the emerald piece would eventually go. Diana had always understood that royal jewelry could become something far more complicated than beauty. To her, certain pieces carried obligation, expectation, and sometimes control. A tiara could be admired by millions, while still reminding the wearer that almost nothing inside royal life was entirely private. Princess Beatrice, still young and far removed from the fiercest succession pressures, occupied a safer emotional space. She was family, but she was not yet part of the battles over who would inherit influence, position, and symbolic authority. Diana eventually confided in a trusted advisor that evening, admitting a fear she had carried quietly for some time. She worried that objects connected to her personal life would one day be absorbed into the institution and stripped of the memories attached to them. William heard only fragments of that conversation. The young prince did not understand the full meaning, but he remembered his mother opening the emerald tiara's case, pausing, and then closing it sharply. The gesture stayed with him because something in her mood had changed. Then came the moment nobody recognized as important at the time. After dinner, Beatrice approached Diana carrying a small emerald brooch she had earlier been allowed to hold. The girl gave it back without hesitation and said it belonged to Aunt Diana and should never be taken simply because someone wanted it. Diana went quiet. The simplicity of the remark struck directly at the fear she had just expressed. Later that same evening, Diana returned to her advisor and made her thinking unmistakably clear. If the emerald tiara ever left her direct possession, she wanted it placed with someone who understood that safeguarding mattered more than claiming. Beatrice's small act had given that principle a human face. Decades later, William finally began connecting those pieces. The designation suddenly made emotional sense, but relief did not follow. A darker question replaced it. If Diana's intention had been this deliberate, then who had later tried to redirect it? That answer would transform William's disappointment into confrontation, because the attempt to challenge his mother's decision had come from much closer to the center of royal power. William did not stay away for long. When he returned, the atmosphere had changed completely. Beatrice remained seated beside the closed jewelry case, while the senior jeweler held the document William had demanded to see. This time, the prince did not ask about sentimental meaning or family tradition. He wanted names, dates, and signatures. Then Beatrice stood and faced him directly, forcing both cousins to confront the possibility that the tiara was about to damage a relationship neither had intended to test. William sat down again and asked for everything. Not a summary, not a careful palace explanation. He wanted the full chain of correspondence surrounding Diana's emerald tiara placed before both of them. The jeweler obeyed, explaining that the original designation recorded Diana's personal intention, while later administrative correspondence questioned whether the piece should eventually enter a central royal collection. That term meant a group of important jewels preserved for wider royal use, rather than remaining under one family member's control. The distinction immediately hardened William's expression. Beatrice watched him carefully as he read. He finally looked up and told her the truth. He was not accusing her of taking anything. She had done nothing wrong, but hearing that something so closely connected to his mother had been assigned outside his immediate family had felt, for one terrible moment, like losing Diana again without warning. The confession stripped away the anger Beatrice had feared. She stepped closer, and told him she would surrender the tiara immediately if keeping it meant becoming the reason he felt his mother had been taken from him once more. William answered quickly, no, he would not allow that. The prince told Beatrice that Diana's wishes could not be defended only when they suited him. If his mother had chosen her, then his grief did not give him the right to erase that choice. The jeweler then introduced the document that changed everything. A later letter had requested clarification on whether the emerald tiara could be reclassified for use by a senior royal woman, rather than remain with Beatrice. William recognized the period immediately. Several inherited pieces had been undergoing reassessment within the household at the time, and the wording felt dangerously procedural. What Diana had intended as a personal act of trust had almost been reduced to an administrative category. Beatrice understood the danger now too. This was no longer about whether she deserved the jewel. It was about whether private wishes could survive the machinery surrounding the crown. William closed the file and made his decision. He would not challenge Beatrice. He would challenge the pressure that had threatened Diana's choice. And that meant requesting an immediate meeting with Charles, the one man whose authority could decide whether the tiara remained a family legacy or became royal property. Charles listened without interruption as William laid the file on the table. No raised voices, no dramatic accusation. That made the meeting more dangerous. One man was defending the memory of his mother. The other was being asked to separate private family wishes from the machinery of the crown. Then Charles reached the page bearing Beatrice's name, read it twice, and set it down. His next decision would determine whether the emerald tiara remained Diana's gift or became an institutional asset. William did not soften his position. He told the king he was not asking for the tiara to be redirected to Catherine, nor was he trying to preserve it for Charlotte. That was precisely the point. If Diana had deliberately chosen Princess Beatrice, then changing that decision now would make every promise of respecting private wishes sound hollow. Charles understood the weight of that argument because, within this family structure, he possessed the practical authority to settle how disputed royal possessions were classified. An institutional asset, in simple terms, was an item treated as belonging to the wider crown rather than to one individual. Charles shifted in his chair as William pressed further. Administrative convenience, the prince warned, could not become an excuse to erase something Diana had chosen with intention. The accusation unsettled him. The monarch had spent years balancing personal history against public duty. But Diana's name still carried a force that could cut through protocol instantly. William left one page open before him and waited. Then the tone changed. Charles removed his glasses and read the later inquiry again. It requested clarification, but it did not carry Diana's authority. It contained no instruction from her, no amendment bearing her approval, nothing that could legitimately override the earlier designation. The king became even more still when he noticed another detail buried in the original wording. Beatrice had not simply been named as a beneficiary. She had been described as a custodian. That word changed everything. A custodian was someone entrusted to preserve an object rather than treat it as unrestricted personal property. Under that instruction, Beatrice was expected to keep the tiara intact, protect its history, and prevent it from being broken up, sold, or permanently transferred for convenience. William saw Charles understand the distinction immediately. The king picked up his pen. He signed an instruction recognizing Beatrice's custodianship and confirming that the later administrative inquiry could not displace Diana's recorded choice. William said nothing, but the tension in him eased. The decision should have ended the dispute. Instead, the moment Charles's instruction began circulating, loyalties shifted, expectations collapsed, and the household was stunned to discover that William had defended Beatrice's claim rather than challenge it. The first assumption inside the royal household had been simple. William would challenge the decision. He would protect Diana's jewelry for his own branch of the family, and Beatrice would quietly step aside. But when Charles's instruction arrived, it revealed the opposite. William had insisted the emerald tiara remain with Beatrice. Suddenly, his walkout looked different. It had not been rejection. It had been grief, and now everyone who had interpreted his silence as hostility was forced to reconsider what had really happened. Charles's signed instruction left little room for argument. Princess Beatrice was recognized as custodian of Diana's emerald tiara, and the later administrative attempt to relocate the piece was rejected. Inside the household, that decision landed hard, because several aides had expected William to push for Catherine or Charlotte. Instead, the prince had argued that neither should replace Diana's recorded choice. A custodianship meant responsibility rather than unrestricted ownership, and that distinction suddenly became the heart of the entire dispute. Beatrice received the confirmation alone. She read the paragraph naming her once, then again, more slowly. When she reached the line confirming that William had supported the original designation, her composure broke. She placed the letter down and began crying. The relief was mixed with guilt. She had spent hours fearing his walkout meant resentment, only to discover that the cousin who had looked most wounded had defended her position when it mattered most. William reacted differently when he learned how deeply she had blamed herself. Frustration replaced some of his sadness. He had never wanted Beatrice to believe she had taken something from him. His grief belonged to Diana's absence, not to her. Yet the misunderstanding proved how dangerous silence could become inside a family, where every gesture carried more meaning than the words left unsaid. Then another detail emerged from Diana's original instructions. The custodian was expected to make the tiara available for family remembrance on exceptional occasions. That note changed the emotional balance again. The jewel had never been intended as a wall between Beatrice and Diana's sons. It was meant to be protected by one person while remaining connected to the wider family memory. William finally understood the structure of his mother's decision. Diana had separated possession from emotional access. Beatrice would safeguard the tiara, but William and Harry would never be shut out of what it represented. That realization made one thing clear. A signed instruction was not enough. William asked to meet Beatrice privately, without jewelers, aides, or advisors. For the first time since the revelation, there would be no paperwork between them, only two members of the same family, one painful inheritance, and the memory of a woman neither wanted turned into a battlefield. There were no advisors in the room when William finally sat opposite Beatrice. No jewelers, no officials, no documents waiting to be signed. The emerald tiara remained elsewhere, deliberately absent. William began by acknowledging what he had not been able to say during the first meeting. When he heard his mother's name followed by someone else's inheritance, he reacted as a son before he could react as a prince. Beatrice answered with an admission of her own, and the tension finally began to break. William told her the walkout had not been calculated. Hearing Diana's wishes reduced to formal language about ownership and designation had struck him harder than he expected. For a few minutes, the prince admitted, he had felt irrationally protective. It was not because he believed Beatrice had done anything wrong. It was because another connection to his mother suddenly seemed to be moving somewhere beyond his reach, and grief had arrived before reason could catch up. Beatrice listened without interrupting. Then she made her own position clear. She had never seen the inheritance as placing her above Catherine, Charlotte, or anyone in Diana's immediate family. The tiara did not make her more important. It did not give her a greater claim to memory. When she reached across and briefly took William's hand, her words were simple. She would protect the jewel for Diana's family, not possess it against them. That distinction changed the conversation completely. William then revealed something Beatrice had not known. He had been the one who pressed Charles to preserve the original wording describing her as custodian, not merely beneficiary. A custodian, he explained, was someone trusted to safeguard something for its meaning and future, rather than treat it as ordinary property. The prince wanted Diana's language protected, because changing that single word would have changed the spirit of her decision. Beatrice went quiet before offering a response that surprised him. If the tiara was ever brought out again, she said, its first appearance should not be about her receiving it. She wanted it present during a private family remembrance of Diana, where no rank, succession, or public expectation could define its meaning. William agreed. The tension that had begun with a walkout finally gave way to something stronger than compromise. They had not divided Diana's memory between them. They had found a way to share responsibility for it. But privacy could not protect the moment forever. Charles's decision was already moving beyond palace walls, and what had nearly become a private family fracture was about to become a public story. One image outside a royal gate would soon redefine William's walkout completely. By the next news cycle, the phrase "William walks out" was everywhere. Without context, it sounded like a royal feud, another inheritance battle, another fracture inside the House of Windsor. Then the second half of the story emerged. William had not walked out because Beatrice received Diana's tiara. He had later defended her right to keep it. The narrative flipped almost instantly, and one moment outside Kensington Palace captured that shift more powerfully than any official statement could have done. William watched the first wave of coverage with growing frustration. Headlines focused on the moment he left the jewelers, presenting his reaction as anger toward Princess Beatrice, and suggesting a bitter inheritance dispute had erupted inside the family. Beatrice hated the framing just as much. She did not want to be remembered as the woman who had received something William believed belonged to him. The truth was far more painful and far less convenient. The prince had been overwhelmed by grief, while she had been overwhelmed by guilt. Then Charles's signed instruction became known. The king's ruling confirmed that Diana's original designation would stand, and crucially, that William himself had argued against redirecting the tiara to Catherine or Charlotte. Broadcasters quickly changed their tone. What had first looked like jealousy now looked like restraint. The prince had reacted emotionally, yes, but when the decision mattered, he had defended his mother's recorded wishes, even though they did not benefit his own branch of the family. Catherine understood that distinction immediately. In a private conversation, she told William that walking out had not made him weak. Returning had defined him. Anyone could feel wounded, she reminded him, but entitlement would have meant using that pain to take the tiara back. He had done the opposite. Her words stayed with him because they separated one uncontrolled moment from the choice that followed. Outside Kensington Palace, the public mood began to shift. A small crowd gathered as television crews discussed the story, and one newspaper front page captured the new interpretation with 3 stark words: Diana's wish honored. Beside the headline were photographs of William and Beatrice, not the emerald tiara. That choice mattered. The story was no longer about a jewel. It was about 2 members of the same family refusing to let grief become possession. One broadcaster put the turning point plainly. William had been given every emotional reason to pull Diana's treasure back toward the direct line of succession, yet he had declined to do it. That public reassessment gave Beatrice and William something they had not possessed since the controversy began: space. The noise was fading. The accusations were losing force. Now only one question remained. How should Diana's tiara be remembered from this point forward? The world had decided what William's walkout meant, but only the family could decide what the jewel itself would come to mean. In the end, William did not ask for the emerald tiara. Beatrice did not surrender it. Charles did not place it inside some anonymous royal collection. The solution was quieter and more personal than any of them had expected. Diana's written choice remained intact, and so did the relationship nearly shaken by it. What began with a chair scraping backward and William walking out, ended with an understanding that finally separated grief from ownership and memory from possession. Charles allowed his ruling to stand without amendment. Princess Beatrice remained the formally recognized custodian of Diana's emerald tiara under the original designation, and that word mattered. A custodian is someone trusted to protect and preserve something, rather than simply possess it without limits. The king understood that changing the arrangement now would reopen the very wound the family had finally begun to close. William understood it too. He made clear that he would not challenge the decision, while Beatrice accepted the responsibility of keeping the peace intact and ensuring Diana remained at the center of its meaning. William returned to the jewelers one final time, but everything about him had changed. Beatrice came with him, and when the case was opened, the prince did not retreat. He stood calmly beside her, facing the same object that had triggered such an immediate wave of grief before. She looked at him and quietly asked whether he wanted to hold the tiara first. William paused. Then he rested his fingers against the edge of the velvet case and told her simply to look after it. Beatrice understood exactly what he meant. She was not being given permission to erase Diana's sons from the story. She was being trusted to carry one part of their mother's legacy without turning it into a contest. That was the deeper truth behind the entire dispute. Diana's choice had not divided the family. It had created stewardship, ensuring that one royal branch could not claim every memory as its exclusive inheritance. William's walkout would remain the most human moment of the story because it exposed the grief beneath the title. He had reacted as a son before he could respond as a future king. But what defined him was what came afterward. He returned, He defended Beatrice. He protected Diana's recorded wishes, even when they did not favor him. And so the emerald tiara remains with Princess Beatrice not as a trophy won from William, but as the responsibility Diana chose for her, while the son who first walked away ultimately became the man who ensured his mother's choice would stand. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.